Billionaire arrives home early, and poor cleaner confesses something that leaves him speechless. The black SUV rolled through the iron gates of the Ashford estate at 11:14 in the morning on a Tuesday, 3 days ahead of schedule, 2 time zones off, and carrying a man whose entire body felt like it had been wrung out and left to dry somewhere over the Atlantic. Zaire Ashford had not slept on the plane. He rarely did anymore. The driver, a quiet man named Terrell, who had worked for Zaire for 6 years and knew better than to ask unnecessary questions, pulled the Lincoln Navigator to a smooth stop in the circular driveway and cut the engine. The September air in Atlanta was still thick and warm, clinging like something stubborn. A few oak leaves had already turned, scattered across the pale stone of the driveway like small defeated flags. Zaire sat for a moment without moving. He looked at the house. It was an extraordinary home, 200 square feet of Georgia limestone and floor-to-ceiling glass, set back from Habersham Road behind a wall of white oak trees. A house designed to suggest power without screaming it. He had bought it 7 years ago, when he was 35, and Nexum Technologies had just crossed $1 billion in valuation, and the board had given him a bonus that made his mother cry into her hands when he told her the number. He had loved this house once. He had stood in the driveway on a cold January afternoon and thought, "This is mine. I built this from nothing." That feeling was gone now. Most feelings were gone. What remained was function. The ability to move through the world, make decisions, execute, return calls. He was very good at all of that. Everything else had been packed into boxes 4 years ago and stored somewhere he no longer had the combination to access. He picked up his phone from the center console. 12 unread messages. 2 from his assistant Priya, 1 from his CFO, the rest from Coltrane Wexler, his business partner and co-founder of Nexum. He did not open Coltrane's messages. Not yet. "I'm good, Terrell," he said quietly. "I'll get my own bags." Terrell nodded once and stepped out to help anyway, because that was who Terrell was. They unloaded the luggage in silence. 2 rolling bags and a leather briefcase, and Zaire tipped his chin toward the gate in a small gesture of dismissal. Terrell understood. He always understood. The driveway was quiet after the SUV pulled away. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a lawn crew was running a leaf blower. A cardinal sat on the gatepost for exactly 3 seconds before deciding Zaire was not interesting and flying away. He picked up his bags and turned toward the front door. She was there before he reached the top step. The door swung inward. She must have heard the car through the foyer window, and for a half second, the woman on the other side of the threshold had no idea it was him. She was looking down at the cleaning caddy in her left hand, adjusting the grip on a spray bottle, mouth moving slightly as if she was going through a mental checklist. She had yellow rubber gloves on. Her uniform was blue and white, neat and pressed despite what was clearly a full morning of work. Her hair was pulled back. There was a small smudge of something pale, furniture polish maybe, on her left forearm just below the wrist. Then she looked up, and everything in her face changed. Not panic, not quite. Something more controlled than panic, but related to it. Her eyes widened, her hand tightened on the spray bottle, and beneath the tightening, beneath the immediate scramble of composure, Zaire caught something else entirely. A flash of recognition that went deeper than "my employer just came home early." It was the recognition of someone who had been waiting for a moment, not wanting it, but not entirely surprised it had arrived. "Mr. Ashford." Her voice was steady, impressive given what her face had just done. You weren't expected until Friday." "I know," he said. Plans changed. He moved to step past her into the foyer. She shifted, not blocking him, nothing that deliberate, but enough that he paused. "Is everything all right?" he asked, reading her. He was very good at reading people. It was the same faculty that made him an excellent negotiator and a complicated man to be close to. He could feel the shape of what someone was hiding before they knew they'd revealed it. Her eyes dropped to the caddy, then came back to his. She made a decision. He could see it happen, a small resolution moving through her like a current. "Mr. Ashford," she said again, quieter this time. "Before you go in, there's something I need to tell you." He set his bags down. Not because he was alarmed, he had not yet earned alarm, but because something in her voice made him feel, obscurely, that this was a conversation that should be met with both feet on the ground. "All right," he said. Her name was Odessa Pruitt. He knew this from the file his household manager had given him when the cleaning service sent her over 8 months ago. She came 3 times a week. She was reliable, thorough, and invisible in the way that good household staff had learned to be, moving through rooms without disturbing them, replacing things to their exact positions, leaving no trace except the faint smell of lemon and the particular stillness of surfaces that had been properly cleaned. He had spoken to her perhaps 6 times in 8 months. Standard exchanges. The east bathroom faucet is still dripping, if you could note that for maintenance. She had always nodded, noted it, handled it. She had never been in his way. He did not know her age, though standing this close to her now he guessed mid-20s. He did not know where she lived. He did not know what she did on the days she was not here. He was about to know a great deal more. "I was cleaning the study," she said. "Your private study, on the 2nd floor. I know I'm not usually—" She stopped, swallowed. "Your household manager told me last month that you wanted the whole 2nd floor done before your return from Vancouver, deep clean, including the study." "I know," he said. "I authorized it." She nodded. "There was a folder on the desk. I wasn't looking through your things. I was moving it to dust underneath, the way I always do, and it came open." She paused. "Some of it fell out. Papers." "Okay." He waited. "I picked them up." She met his eyes directly. There was something almost painful about the steadiness of her gaze, the effort it was costing her. "And I read enough to understand what I was looking at." "Which was?" She set the cleaning caddy down on the front step, reached into the front pocket of her uniform, an interior pocket, flat and buttoned, the kind you wouldn't know was there, and withdrew a single folded piece of paper. She held it out to him. He didn't take it. Not yet. "What is this?" he said. "A copy," she said. "I photographed a few pages on my phone and printed one when I got home that night. I know that was wrong. I'm not—" She breathed. "I'm not trying to cause problems, or threaten you, or anything like that. I need you to understand that. Tell me what's in it." She looked at him for a long moment. The leaf blower in the distance had stopped. The neighborhood was very quiet. "It's a wire transfer summary," she said. 11 transfers, going back 16 months, from a subsidiary account tied to Nexum Technologies, Nexum Capital Holdings, Delaware registration, to a private account in the Cayman Islands. The amounts range from 800,000 to just under 3 million. Each one. Zaire did not move. "The authorization signatures on all 11 transfers," she said, and her voice dropped by half a register, carrying the full weight of what she was about to say, "are not yours." He stared at her. "They're Coltrane Wexlers," she said. The silence between them stretched to something vast and structural, the kind of silence that holds the weight of everything that is about to change. He took the paper from her hand. He read it. He read it again. He looked up. "How do you know what an authorization signature looks like on a wire transfer document?" he said, very quietly. Something moved through her eyes, a door opening or closing. He couldn't tell which. "Because," she said, "I used to be a licensed CPA candidate. I worked forensic accounting for 2 years before—" She stopped. The muscles in her jaw tightened. "Before my life fell apart." He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in 8 months. "Odessa," he said slowly. She nodded. She was trembling slightly. He noticed it now, the fine tremor in her hands, the way she had pressed them flat against her thighs to hide it. There's something else, she said. The name on the receiving Cayman account. The beneficial owner. She paused. It's registered to a holding company called Wexler Pruitt Partners. He went very still. Pruitt, he said. My father, she said. Declan Pruitt. He and Coltrane Wexler did business together 6 years ago. A development deal in Buckhead. Coltrane defrauded him. Took everything. Her voice was flat and careful, the way voices get when they are holding too much. My father lost his company, his savings, everything he'd built. He died of a stroke 14 months later. I spent the next 3 years paying off the debt collectors and working every job I could find. And eventually, she gestured at her uniform. A small, quiet gesture. Eventually, she said, I became a housekeeper. Zaire stood perfectly still in the doorway of his own home, the forged transfer summary in his hands, looking at the woman who had just handed him the thing that could destroy his company, or save it, and who was visibly shaking with the effort of having told the truth. Why didn't you just leave, he said, when you found it? Why didn't you walk away? She looked at him, and the answer in her eyes was complicated and not entirely translatable into language, something about justice and fathers and years of silence that had calcified into action. Because someone had to say something, she said, and I was the one standing there. He folded the paper, slid it into his inside jacket pocket. He reached down and picked up his bags. Come inside, he said. She followed him into the house she had been cleaning for 8 months, and neither of them understood yet how completely the world had already rearranged itself around that single act of courage. But the rearranging was only beginning. The study was exactly as she had left it. She had replaced the folder, squared it to the corner of the desk at the precise angle she had found it, using her thumb to measure the margin. A habit from her accounting days, when precision was a virtue and sloppiness was a cardinal sin. The desk lamp was off. The blinds were drawn to 3/4, filtering the September light to a controlled gold. Every surface was clean. Zaire set his bags inside the door and stood there for a moment, taking in the room. He crossed to the desk, opened the folder. Odessa stood near the bookshelf, hands still, watching him read. She had removed the yellow gloves, somewhere between the foyer and the second-floor landing. They were in the pocket of her uniform now, folded together. He read for 4 minutes without speaking. She counted. Old habit. 16 months, he said finally, without looking up. That's when the first transfer occurred, she said. October 2 years ago. The pattern is irregular enough to avoid automated flagging. The amounts vary, the timing varies, but the source account is always the same subsidiary. And the authorization chain is always Wexler's signature, not yours. He looked up. How do you know what my signature looks like? She nodded toward the corner of the desk, a framed document. A letter of commendation from the governor of Georgia, awarded at some tech policy forum 18 months ago. Signed and framed. I've been cleaning this room for 8 months. He followed her gaze to the frame, looked back at her. Walk me through it, he said. The authorization chain. She blinked. Excuse me? You said the authorization chain. That's a specific term. Walk me through what you saw. She felt the floor shift slightly beneath her, not literally, but in the way a conversation shifts when it stops being an explanation and starts being an interrogation. She steadied herself. A wire transfer at Nexum's level would require a dual authorization system, she said. 2 signatures, CEO and CFO, or CEO and a designated financial officer with POA. What I saw in those documents was Coltrane Wexler signing as both the initiating authority and the approving officer, using 2 different signature blocks on the same authorization line. Zaire was very still. He has limited POA on the subsidiary accounts. I know. It's referenced in the subsidiary charter documents. Those were in the same folder. She paused. The POA was meant for operational expenses under $250,000, not for transfers of this magnitude, not for transfers to offshore private accounts. He stared at her. You read the subsidiary charter, he said. It fell out with the rest. All of it. She held his gaze. I'm a fast reader. Another silence. Outside, a car moved slowly down Habersham Road. Inside, the house breathed, the soft hum of climate control, the tick of a wall clock somewhere down the hall. Why did you copy only one page? He said. Because I didn't know how much time I had, she said. I took photos of 6 pages on my phone. I printed the transfer summary because it's the clearest single piece of evidence. The others... She stopped. I still have the photos. I want to see them. She looked at him. On my phone. I know. She reached into the other pocket of her uniform, the one that held her personal phone, a battered Samsung with a cracked lower left corner, and unlocked it. She pulled up the photos and held the phone out to him. He took it, scrolled through in silence. The photos were clear, steady, methodically shot. She had photographed each page straight on, even lighting, no glare, like someone who had done this before. You're good at this, he said. He didn't say it as a compliment exactly, more as an observation that carried its own quiet weight. I used to be good at a lot of things, she said. He handed the phone back. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't fully read. She was good at reading expressions too, but he was one of those people who processed internally, who had learned to make their face a surface that revealed only what they chose to reveal. She could feel the intelligence behind it, working. Tell me about Wexler Pruitt Partners, he said. She told him. Not everything. Not the way grief actually feels, not the particular shade of grey her father's face had turned at the hospital, not what it was like to sit in a bankruptcy attorney's office at 22 and learn that the numbers she had always trusted, the ones her father had raised her to respect, the ones she had built her whole academic life around, could be made to lie. She told him the structure of it, the facts. Declan Pruitt had built a mid-size commercial real estate company over 30 years. Pruitt Development Group, headquartered in Midtown Atlanta, 16 employees at its peak, a portfolio of 7 properties, 4 of them fully owned. When Declan was 61, Coltrane Wexler had approached him about a joint development deal in Buckhead, a mixed-use project that would have been the largest of Declan's career. Coltrane was 38 at the time, already a minor tech celebrity, already maneuvering toward what would become Nexum. The deal had looked extraordinary on paper. My father trusted him, Odessa said. Her voice was level. She had practiced being level about this. He signed over the majority stake in 4 of his properties as collateral for the joint venture. When the deal collapsed, and it collapsed exactly the way Coltrane planned it to collapse, my father was left holding debts he couldn't cover and assets that had been transferred out of the venture before the dissolution. Where did the assets go? A series of LLCs, all Cayman registered, all with names that don't appear anywhere near Coltrane Wexler's public profile. She paused. Wexler Pruitt Partners is one of them. He kept my father's name in it. I don't know if that was arrogance or cruelty or both. Zaire's jaw tightened. It was the first visible crack in his composure, small, but real. Did your father file suit? He tried. The attorneys he could afford said the offshore structure made recovery essentially impossible without a federal investigation, and that would take years. He couldn't afford years. She looked at her hands. He died 11 months after the deal fell apart, stress-induced hemorrhagic stroke. He was 62. She looked back up. I was 23. Zaire said nothing, but he did not look away. I paid off what I could, she said, sold his apartment, cashed out his retirement account, what was left of it after the creditors. I was finishing my CPA exams and working 3 jobs. After a while, she shook her head. After a while, I stopped finishing things. She said it without self-pity. Just as a fact, the way you state a fact about weather or distance. And then you ended up cleaning houses, he said, not dismissively. He said it the way a man says something when he is trying to understand its full weight. It pays cash. The agency doesn't require a degree. The hours work around—" She stopped. He caught the pause. His eyes sharpened. "Around what?" She looked at the window, at the three-quarter blinds and the Atlanta September light coming through them like something patient and persistent. "I have other obligations," she said carefully. "That's all." He watched her. She felt the quality of his attention. It was the attention of someone who was used to incomplete information being a problem to be solved rather than a courtesy to be accepted. "When did you find out I was Coltrane Wexler's partner?" he said. "Before you took this job or after?" The room got very quiet. She had known this question was coming. She had rehearsed her answer 7 times on the drive in from her apartment that morning, and still it sat in her chest like a stone. "Before," she said. He exhaled slowly through his nose. "How long before?" "The agency placed me here 8 months ago. I looked up the address before the first appointment." She held his gaze. "I recognize the name Ashford from the Nexum founding documents. I read those publicly filed documents 2 years ago when I was trying to understand who had been in Coltrane Wexler's professional orbit around the time he defrauded my father. So you came here looking for evidence?" "No." She said it firmly. "I came here because I needed the work, and the assignment paid well, and I told myself it was a coincidence I was going to manage. I was not looking for anything. I was not planning anything." She paused. "I found what I found by accident, and I almost didn't say anything. I almost just—" She pressed her lips together, put the folder back, and went home, and never came back. "Why didn't you?" She was quiet for a moment. "Because you're being robbed," she said. "And I know what it's like when someone takes everything a person has built and walks away without consequence. I know what it costs." A beat. "I couldn't just watch it happen to someone else, even if you're—" She stopped again. "Even if I'm what?" She met his eyes. "Even if you're a billionaire who presumably has lawyers and accountants and 100 people whose entire job is to protect you from exactly this. Even so." She looked at the folder on the desk. Someone had to say something. He was quiet. He turned toward the window. She could see the side of his face, the set of his jaw, the way his eyes moved over something she couldn't see, working through what she had told him. Then he crossed to the desk and opened the folder again, moved several pages aside, pulled out a document from further back in the stack, one she hadn't fully examined because it had been at the bottom and she had heard the estate manager's car in the driveway and had not had time. He held it out to her. She took it. It was a photograph, a printed digital photograph, slightly oversized, tucked into a plastic sleeve. 2 men at what appeared to be a restaurant. Bones, she thought, the steakhouse in Buckhead. She recognized the booths. Coltrane Wexler on the left, laughing. Zaire Ashford on the right, younger by a few years, also laughing. And between them, small and solemn in the way small children are solemn when they do not understand why the adults around them are so loud, sat a little boy. She looked at the child. Something in her chest went cold. The boy was perhaps 2 years old in the photograph. Round-faced, serious, with close-cropped dark hair and the particular gravity of a child who observed more than he spoke. He had Zaire's exact eyes, the shape of them, the depth. She looked up. Zaire was watching her with an expression she had not seen on him before, something open and broken and raw, living just below the surface of his composure, like something pressing against glass from the inside. "My son," he said. "Elias. He was 2 in that picture." A pause that lasted an entire room. "He died 4 years ago in the car accident that killed my wife." The word "died" sat in the air between them. She held the photograph. She did not breathe. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I keep that photograph in the folder," he said, "because it's the last picture I have of him. I don't know why it ended up in the study pile. It shouldn't have been there." He paused. "You said there was something else at the door." After you told me about the transfers." She had not yet told him the rest. She stood holding the photograph of a child she had seen alive, in the flesh, 7 weeks ago, in the back room of a community health clinic in Kirkwood, where she had taken him for a fever. A child she had found abandoned in a parking garage in Edgewood 2 years ago, barely 3 years old, wearing no shoes, holding a stuffed rabbit missing one ear. A child she had been raising alone, quietly, with no paperwork and no explanation and no idea who he belonged to. A child with Zaire Ashford's exact eyes. She looked at the photograph. She looked at the man in front of her, and the confession she had already made, the one she had thought was the hardest thing she would ever do, revealed itself to be only the first room in a much larger house of truths. "Mr. Ashford," she said. Her voice did not shake this time. She was past shaking now. She was past everything except the single, terrifying, inevitable fact. "I need you to sit down." What she said next would collapse the 4 years Zaire Ashford had spent learning to live without his son, and begin something neither of them had the language to name. He sat, not because he was told to. Zaire Ashford had not been told what to do by another person in a very long time. He sat because his body made the decision before his mind could argue with it, a deep, cellular response to the particular quality of her voice, the way she had said, "Sit down," not as a command, but as a warning. The way a person says it when what comes next is going to require you to have solid ground beneath you. He pulled the desk chair out and sat in it. He was still in his travel suit. He had not eaten since somewhere over Tennessee. He set his hands flat on his desk and looked at her. "Talk," he said. Odessa stood in front of him with the photograph still in her hands. She looked at it one more time, at the little boy's face, serious and round, with those unmistakable eyes, and then she set it carefully on the corner of the desk and looked at Zaire directly. "2 years ago," she said, "in late November, it was the week after Thanksgiving, I was leaving the Edgewood Kroger. It was around 9 in the evening. Cold. I was cutting through the parking garage on Clifton because it's faster than going around, and I heard—" She stopped. She pressed her lips together. "I heard a child, not crying, just talking, to himself, the way small children do sometimes when they're trying not to be scared." Zaire said nothing. His hands were flat on the desk. "He was sitting against the wall near the stairwell door," she said, "on the second level of the garage. He had on a too big sweatshirt, no shoes, jeans. He was holding a stuffed rabbit. The ear was missing, the left one. He had scratches on one knee. He looked at me and said—" She paused. Her voice had gone very quiet. "My rabbit's name is Biscuit." Zaire made a sound. It was not quite a word. It was the sound a person makes when something internal breaks along a seam that has been holding for a very long time. She did not stop. She had learned, in the years since her father died, that stopping was not mercy. Stopping was just delayed pain. "I called 911 immediately," she said. "I stayed with him until the police came. They took him into DFCS emergency custody that night. I gave my statement. I went home. And then," she exhaled, "I couldn't stop thinking about him. Something about the way he'd said it. My rabbit's name is Biscuit. Like the most important thing in the world was that I understood who Biscuit was." She reached up and brushed something from the corner of her eye. Not crying. Not quite. Close to it. "I called DFCS the next morning, and the morning after that. I asked about him. They told me he was in emergency foster placement. No identification had been found. No missing person report matching his description in the system. His age was estimated at 3 to 4 years old. No next of kin located." She paused. "I asked if I could apply for emergency foster placement." Zaire looked at her. "You applied to foster him?" "I was approved 6 weeks later. He came to live with me the day after Christmas." She met his eyes steadily. "His name, the name he already had when I found him, was Eli." The word landed in the room like something falling from a great height. Zaire stood up. He did it slowly, gripping the edge of the desk, like a man who is not entirely sure the floor will hold him. "Eli," he said. He had been calling himself Eli. He could say his first name but not his last. He was 3.5 approximately. He knew the month of his birthday, November, but not the date. She watched him carefully. He knew a few other things. He knew his daddy worked with computers. He knew his daddy's name. She paused. He called him Z. Zaire turned away from her. He walked to the window and stood with his back to her and both hands pressed against the frame. She gave him 30 seconds. She counted. "The accident," she said. "The one that killed your wife. I looked it up after I took this job and realized who you were. I-285, 4 years ago, November. A collision with a semi-truck." She paused. The initial report said 2 fatalities. Your wife, Camille Ashford, and a male child, age 3, unidentified due to the extent of the vehicle damage. The medical examiner's report listed the child as probable, not confirmed. Zaire turned around. His face was, she had no accurate word for it, beyond grief, beyond shock. It was the face of a man whose entire architecture of loss had just been handed back to him as something else entirely. Not an ending, but a theft. "Probable," he said. "They told me—" He stopped. His jaw worked. "They told me the identification was complicated by the condition of the scene," she said gently. "I read the full report. It's public record through the accident investigation filing." She looked at him. "Zaire, Eli is alive. He is 3 months away from his 6th birthday. He is living in my apartment in Kirkwood, and right now he is at the YMCA on Flat Shoals with my neighbor Darnetta, who watches him on Tuesdays and Thursdays while I work." She paused. "He is fine. He is healthy. He can read at a 2nd-grade level. He is obsessed with dinosaurs, and he still sleeps with Biscuit the rabbit." Zaire sat back down. He sat down the way buildings settle, slow and complete. "Why didn't you come forward?" he said. His voice had changed. There was something under the surface of it now, not anger exactly, but something adjacent to it, something that needed a direction to move in. "If you figured out who he was, when did you figure it out?" "Gradually," she said. "He mentioned his daddy's name. I noted it. I started watching the news coverage of the accident anniversary. Nexum ran a tribute piece. You gave a brief statement. There was a photo." She looked at her hands. "I saw your eyes in his face, and I told myself I was making it up, that it was coincidence, that his biological family, whoever they were, would have filed a missing persons report." "No report was filed because I was told he was dead," Zaire said, very quietly, very carefully. "I know," she said. "I understand that now. But at the time I didn't know why no one was looking. I only knew the DFCS had registered him as an unidentified child, that no family had come forward in 8 months, and that I had fallen completely and entirely in love with a little boy who had no one." Silence. "I'm not his mother," she said. "I know that. I have never told him I am. He calls me Dessa. He knows he is fostered. When he asks about his family, I tell him that his family loved him very much and that we are still looking." She looked at Zaire. "I have never stopped looking. What I didn't know how to do was find you without it looking like I was, without it looking like I had an agenda." "You had an agenda when you took this job," he said, not accusing, just stating. "I had grief," she said, "and proximity to the man who caused it. That is not the same thing." A beat. "I swear to you, I did not know for certain that Eli was your son when I took this position. I suspected. I was afraid of being wrong. I was afraid of what it would mean if I was right. What were you afraid it would mean?" She looked at him for a long moment. Honest answer. "That I would lose him." The study was very still. Outside, Atlanta moved on in its ordinary Tuesday way, traffic thickening toward noon, the city's particular version of itself on a September weekday. Inside, a man sat at his desk, absorbing the information that the son he had grieved for 4 years was alive and well, and could read at a second-grade level and slept with a one-eared rabbit. "I want to see him," Zaire said. "Yes," she said. "Of course. Today." She nodded. "Darnetta brings him home at 2. My apartment is 20 minutes from here." She looked at him carefully. "Zaire, I need to say something to you. Before we go." He waited. "He doesn't know yet," she said. "He doesn't know who you are, and he has already had—" She stopped, started again. "He has had enormous upheaval in his short life. He found his footing. He is happy. He trusts the world a little bit again." She looked at him directly. "I am not asking you to slow down. I would never ask that. I am only asking you to step carefully. With him. He is not fragile, but he is 6 years old, and the most important thing we can give him right now is the truth delivered by someone who can be steady." Zaire looked at her for a long time. "You love him," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," she said. "I do." Something moved through his expression. Complex, enormous, not entirely named. He stood. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. He looked at the photograph on the corner of the desk. Elias at 2 years old, solemn between 2 laughing men. And then he looked away. "20 minutes?" he said. "20 minutes," she said. He moved toward the door. Then he stopped and turned back. He looked at her with an expression that she would remember for a long time. The particular way it carried both devastation and something that had not yet decided what it was going to be. "Your father's name?" he said. "Declan Pruitt." "Yes." "I'm going to get him back too," he said. "What Wexler took, every cent. I'll make sure of it." She didn't have an answer for that. She stood in the study that she had been cleaning twice a week for 8 months and felt the specific, overwhelming sensation of a life being reorganized by forces she had set in motion and could no longer control. "Let's go see your son," she said. They rode to Kirkwood in the back of the Navigator, side by side and not speaking, which was perhaps the most honest conversation 2 people can have. The city scrolled past the tinted windows. Zaire held the folder of documents in his lap. Odessa held her phone with both hands, the cracked corner pressing into her palm. Somewhere in the city, in a community center gymnasium on Flat Shoals Avenue, a 5-year-old boy with his father's eyes was learning to tie his shoes and telling anyone who would listen that the largest dinosaur ever discovered was the Argentinosaurus, and that it weighed more than a space shuttle. He had no idea what was coming. Children rarely do. Neither, in truth, did the 2 adults in the car. The apartment building was a modest 3-story walk-up on Kavanaugh Street. Solid bones, clean landscaping, a red front door that Odessa had repainted herself the previous spring. Zaire stood on the sidewalk and looked up at it. He had not stood on a sidewalk like this in a very long time. The buildings he generally moved between were different in scale. Odessa unlocked the front door with a key. She held it open. He stepped through. The hallway was clean and plain. A community bulletin board near the mailboxes, a scuffed linoleum floor, the faint smell of someone's lunch cooking on the 2nd floor. They took the stairs. Her apartment was 2B. She paused outside the door. "He won't be home yet," she said. "We have a few minutes." She looked at him. "Are you okay?" He was not okay. He was comprehensively, structurally not okay. But he said, "Open the door." She opened it. The apartment was small and extremely alive. That was the first impression, the density of lived-in life, the specific warmth of a space where someone small and energetic spent most of their time. A low bookshelf near the door, overflowing with picture books and chapter books, and 3 volumes of a children's dinosaur encyclopedia. A pair of small sneakers by the door, one of them untied. A drawing on the refrigerator, a green creature with enormous teeth, labelled in uneven capital letters, Trex at DNR. On the coffee table, a half-finished Lego project. On the windowsill, a small plastic brachiosaurus. And on the arm of the couch, propped up with his one remaining ear standing straight, looking at them with the stoic patience of a beloved object, a worn, grey, stuffed rabbit. Zaire crossed to the couch, slowly. He picked up the rabbit. He held it in both hands and stood in the living room of a woman he barely knew and could not make a sound. His chest moved. His eyes were wet. Odessa stood by the kitchen and did not look away and did not say anything because there was nothing to say and because some moments do not need to be filled. He stood there holding Biscuit for a long time. Then they heard footsteps in the hallway outside. 2 sets, one adult, one small and fast, and a child's voice saying something with great urgency about a swimming pool, and Zaire set the rabbit back on the arm of the couch exactly where it had been and turned toward the door. The knob turned, the door opened, and Elias Ashford, who had been lost for 4 years and had been safe all along, came home. The door opened, and Eli came in like weather. He was moving fast, the way he always moved. Full velocity, full presence, no concept of half measures. He had his backpack on one shoulder and was mid-sentence before the door had finished swinging open, talking to Darnetta behind him about whether the YMCA pool was heated or just cold, and whether cold pools were actually good for you or just something adults said to avoid complaining. Then he saw Odessa, and then he saw the man standing next to her. He stopped. He was very good at stopping when the situation called for it. Most 5-year-olds had 1 speed. Eli had 2. Full and complete stillness. There was very little in between. He looked at Zaire. Zaire looked at him. For 3 seconds the room held its breath. Then Eli said, with great scientific certainty, "You're tall." Zaire said, "I know." Eli considered this answer, found it acceptable, and walked to the couch to retrieve Biscuit, tucking him under his arm with practiced ease. He looked at the man again. "Do you know Dessa?" "I do," Zaire said. His voice was absolutely steady. Odessa did not know how he managed it. "From work." "Yes, from work." Eli nodded, satisfied. He unzipped his backpack with focused determination and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a drawing, fresh from the YMCA art table. He held it up without looking at it, the way children present artwork, with total confidence that the work speaks for itself. A large orange creature with improbably small arms. "I made a T-Rex. His name is Gerald." "Gerald is very realistic," Zaire said. Eli looked at him with renewed interest. Most adults said good job or made the sound of performed appreciation. This man had said realistic. That was a different category. "Do you know about dinosaurs?" Eli asked. "Some. I know the T-Rex had terrible depth perception." Eli's eyes went wide. He turned to Odessa with pure vindication. "See? I told Marcus at school, and he said I made it up." "Marcus is wrong," Zaire said. Darnetta, standing quietly in the doorway, caught Odessa's eye. Odessa gave her a small nod. "I'll explain later." Darnetta accepted this, with the grace of a woman who understood that Odessa's life was not simple. "I'll be downstairs," Darnetta said, and pulled the door softly shut. Odessa made coffee she did not drink and sat at the kitchen table while Zaire sat on the living room floor. He had moved from the couch at Eli's invitation, which had been extended by the simple method of Eli sitting beside the Lego project and looking at Zaire expectantly until he joined. They were building something. Eli was explaining the structural requirements of a Lego volcano. Zaire was listening with the full, slightly demolished attention of a man who had not expected to spend his Tuesday afternoon doing this. Odessa watched them from the kitchen. She watched Eli's hands, quick, precise, capable of focus unusual for his age. She watched the way Zaire tracked every motion, every word, like someone memorizing something they had almost lost forever. At one point, Eli looked up. What's your name? Zaire. Eli tested the word. Zaire. He paused. That's a river. In Africa. Now it's called the Congo River, but it used to be the Zaire River. I know because of my atlas. Zaire looked at Odessa over the boy's head. His expression was not something she had language for, wonder and grief, and something that was quietly beginning to resemble joy, the way a room fills with light before the sun clears the horizon. That's right, Zaire said. My mother named me after it. Eli nodded approvingly. I like it, he said, and returned to the Lego with the air of a man who had rendered his verdict. Odessa pressed her fingers to her lips and looked at the ceiling and breathed very carefully. It was Zaire's phone that changed everything. A series of texts at 3:47, fast, overlapping from a contact saved as Priya, do not ignore. He glanced at the screen and something in his face went cold. He tilted the phone so she could read. Coltrane called the Vancouver office looking for you. 3 times. He knows you came back early. He called legal, asking about the Delaware subsidiary. Someone talked to him. I don't know who. Please call me. Odessa felt the bottom of her stomach drop. He knows, she said. He suspects, Zaire said. There's a difference, but not a large one. He looked at her carefully. Did you speak to anyone about what you found? No one. Not a word. The household manager. Mrs. Farrow authorized the deep clean. She doesn't have study access. She wouldn't have known what she was looking at. Odessa paused. Who else has been in that study? His jaw tightened. Coltrane was at the house in August. A working dinner. I let him use the study to take a call. He exhaled. He may have realized a document was out of place, or he's been monitoring subsidiary account activity and noticed an inquiry. He ran a hand along the back of his neck. Either way, he knows something is wrong and he's moving fast. He looked at Eli on the floor, fully absorbed in Gerald the Lego volcano, making quiet eruption sounds under his breath. Odessa followed his gaze. You should take him somewhere safe, she said quietly. If Coltrane starts pulling threads, if he realizes you know and that you came here, he won't touch a child. He let my father die of a stroke without losing 1 night of sleep, she said. I don't know what he will or won't do. Zaire was quiet for a moment. Then he called Terrell. I need you back at the Kavanaugh Street address. Bring the second car, now. He paused. And call Monroe. He hung up. He looked at her steadily. I'm taking you and Eli to the Havisham house. You'll both be safer there with my security team while I understand exactly what Coltrane knows. I can't just... Odessa. He said her name with a quiet authority that was not unkind. He defrauded his own partner. He concealed a child's survival for 4 years. He has 11 wire transfers and a reason to make sure none of it surfaces. He looked at her. You found the evidence. You told me. And now Coltrane is making calls. Come to the house. She wanted to argue. She had been arguing with circumstances her entire adult life, holding ground, managing alone. The muscle memory of refusal was strong, but she looked at Eli on the floor, perfectly serene, and she said, Let me pack a bag. She was in the bedroom packing when she heard it. Not the apartment buzzer, the building's front entrance buzzer, lower in pitch. She gave it 2 seconds, then she heard Darnetta's voice from the ground floor, raised, sharp, the tone of someone being pushed and not accepting it. She moved to the window, 2 men on the front step. Dark coats, too heavy for September. One had his hand flat on the doorframe in a way that was not casual. It was the posture of someone preventing a door from closing. The cold moved through her from the chest outward. She went back to the living room. Zaire. He was already standing. He had heard Darnetta too. His phone was in his hand. Go into the bedroom with Eli, he said. Lock the door. Don't open it until you hear my voice or Terrell's. Zaire, go. Gently. 0 room in it. She crossed to Eli, who was looking up with the alert expression he got when adult energy shifted in ways he could sense but not name. She held out her hand. Hey, Bug, she said, voice steady. "Let's go look at something in the bedroom." He took her hand without question. He trusted her completely, the way he had trusted her from the first night when she had sat beside his DFCS placement bed and read him 3 chapters of The Enormous Crocodile by flashlight because the bulb had burned out and neither of them cared. She led him to the bedroom, locked the door. She sat on the floor with her back against the bed, Eli in her lap, Biscuit between them, and she listened. Zaire opened the apartment door before they could knock. The 2 men were not police. They had the deliberate, contained quality of private contractors, men hired to deliver messages that aren't written down. They did not look surprised to see him, which told him they had known he was here, which told him Coltrane had resources moving faster than he'd accounted for. "Mr. Ashford," the taller one said, "you have 30 seconds to tell me who sent you," Zaire said, "and 31 seconds before my security detail arrives and this hallway becomes a much less comfortable place to stand." The man reached into his coat, produced an envelope, white, sealed, and held it out. "Mr. Wexler asked us to deliver this personally," he said. "He also asked us to make sure you understood that the housekeeping staff at your Havisham property would be better served by seeking employment elsewhere, immediately." Zaire took the envelope. He looked at both men with an expression that had no temperature in it at all. "Tell Coltrane," he said quietly, "that I've already read what's in the folder." He shut the door. He stood in Odessa's living room, Gerald the tea, Rex on the refrigerator, the half-finished Lego volcano on the table, and opened the envelope. Inside, a single line, handwritten on Nexum letterhead in Coltrane Wexler's left-handed slant. "Let it go, Z. We both know you won't like what I find if you make me start looking." Zaire folded the note, pocketed it alongside the other document he'd carried all day. He knocked on the bedroom door. "Odessa, it's me." The lock turned. She opened the door with Eli on her hip, the boy's arms around her neck, Biscuit dangling from one small hand. She looked at Zaire's face. "What did they want?" "To deliver a message," he said. "And to make sure you understood your position here was no longer safe." She held his gaze. Her eyes were calm, the particular calm of someone who has lived through enough that crisis no longer had the power to completely unmoor her. Just knock her sideways. She could handle sideways. "I'm done running from Coltrane Wexler," she said. "He already took everything once." Zaire looked at her, at Eli, at the apartment full of books and dinosaur drawings and one-eared rabbits. He looked at the woman who had found his son in a parking garage on a cold November night and spent 2 years keeping him safe without knowing who to call. He reached out and gently adjusted Biscuit so the rabbit wasn't dragging on the floor. "You're not running," he said. "You're relocating, strategically." Something that was not quite a smile moved across her face. The first time he had seen it, not her professional composure or careful steadiness, but the actual human person underneath, showing through for just a moment. "Strategically," she said. "Pack the dinosaur books," he said. "He'll want them." Terrell's text came through, downstairs, second car running, and the 3 of them left together. Odessa grabbed Eli's sneakers off the mat by the door, the ones still untied, and she didn't have time to register how domestic and ordinary and right that gesture felt until they were already in the elevator going down. She lasted 41 hours at the Havisham house, 41 hours of security rotations, and Zaire on the phone with lawyers, and Eli sleeping in the guest room with Biscuit tucked under his chin. Thrilled by the size of the bathtub and the fact that the television was enormous. 41 hours of Zaire's housekeeper, Mrs. Farrow, making Eli pancakes in the morning and asking no questions. 41 hours of Odessa sitting in the sunroom at night after Eli was asleep, listening to the house, unable to close her eyes. Because the house was enormous and quiet and full of the specific weight of a life she did not belong to. And because Zaire kept looking at her, not the way employers look at employees, or the way people look at someone who has done them an enormous favor, but in the way that she recognized from a time in her life when she had still believed that people could look at each other like that without it eventually becoming the source of everything that hurt. She had not let anyone look at her that way in 4 years. On the 41st hour, at 2 a.m., while Zaire was on a call with his attorney in New York and Monroe's team was doing their perimeter rotation, Odessa packed a bag. One bag. She left Eli's dinosaur books on the guest room nightstand, where he would find them. She wrote a note, 3 sentences, because she could not manage more. She left it on the kitchen counter, and she walked out of the Habersham house into the warm September night, and did not look back. The note said, "He is yours. You will be extraordinary for him. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to stay." She was gone before anyone found the note. And Zaire Ashford, who had survived a plane crash of a business deal, who had rebuilt his company from the edge of collapse, who had learned to live inside a grief so total it had rearranged the architecture of his personality, stood in his kitchen at 2:30 in the morning and read 3 sentences and felt something he had not felt since the accident. Panic. Not because of Coltrane, not because of the fraud, because she was gone. And she was wrong, and he was not going to let her believe it. He found her in Savannah, not through Monroe's security team, though they tried, not through her phone, which she had turned off somewhere south of Macon on I-16. The battery pulled the way people do when they know they are being looked for and are not yet ready to be found. Not through Darnetta, who had received a text from Odessa at 3 a.m., saying only, "I'm okay, please don't worry, I'll explain," and who had called Zaire at 7 in the morning and told him as much, with the tone of a woman who had strong opinions about the situation, but was choosing her moment. He found her because of a receipt. Odessa had stopped for gas at a Shell station on I-16 just past Warner Robins, and she had used her debit card because she had $47 in cash, and the tank was nearly empty, and she was not yet thinking clearly enough to be untraceable. The charge appeared on her account at 4:18 a.m. Zaire had a contact at a financial compliance firm who owed him a significant professional favor. By 6 a.m., he knew the direction she was heading. By noon, he knew she had checked into the Kehoe Inn on Columbia Square in Savannah's historic district, having paid in cash at the front desk with the money she had pulled from an ATM in Warner Robins. He drove himself. He did not take Terrell. He did not tell Monroe. He took the Navigator south on I-75 and then east on I-16 with the windows down and Atlanta falling away behind him and 3.5 hours of flat Georgia highway ahead of him. And he used every mile of it to figure out what he was going to say. He did not figure it out. Some things cannot be rehearsed into shape. Eli, when Zaire had told him that morning that he needed to take a short trip, had looked at him with the particular gravity of a child who understood more than adults generally gave him credit for. "Is Dessa okay?" he had asked. "She will be," Zaire had said. And then, because Eli deserved honesty, and because Zaire was already becoming the kind of father he wanted to be, rather than the kind circumstances had interrupted. She left because she got scared. "I'm going to go find her." Eli had considered this for a long moment. He was sitting at the kitchen island eating cereal, biscuit propped against the orange juice carton, the morning sun coming through the Habersham house windows in wide, warm panels across the marble floor. "Sometimes I get scared and I hide too," Eli said. "Under the bed. Dessa always finds me, though." "I know," Zaire said. "She sits on the floor next to the bed and talks to me until I come out." He stirred his cereal. "She doesn't make me come out. She just talks." Zaire looked at his son, his 5-year-old son, who had been lost and was found, and who was sitting in the morning light, dispensing wisdom in between bites of Honey Nut Cheerios, and felt the full, staggering, completely unearned gift of it move through him like a current. "I'll sit on the floor," Zaire said. Eli nodded, satisfied. "Take Biscuit," he said, and held out the rabbit. Zaire looked at Biscuit. He thought about what it meant that Eli was offering him the most important thing he owned. He took the rabbit. The Kehoe Inn was a narrow Victorian on Columbia Square, restored to something beautiful, dark wood, high ceilings, the particular smell of old buildings that have been carefully preserved. Zaire parked on the square and went inside. The woman at the front desk was 60-something, reading glasses on a beaded chain, the unhurried manner of someone who managed a 12-room inn and was not going to be rushed by anyone, regardless of how expensive their suit was. "I'm looking for a guest," he said. "Odessa Pruitt." The woman looked at him over her glasses. "We don't give out guest room information." "I know," he said. "I'm not asking for the room number. I'm asking if you could call her room and tell her that Zaire is in the lobby." He paused. "She'll know what to decide." The woman studied him for a moment with the frank, assessing gaze of someone who had seen a great many people pass through a lobby in 30 years of hospitality work. Whatever she saw in his face appeared to satisfy something. She picked up the phone. He waited. He stood in the lobby of the Kehoe Inn on a Wednesday afternoon with a one-eared stuffed rabbit in his left hand, and he waited. 4 minutes passed. He counted. Then the stairs creaked, and she came down. She looked like she had not slept. Her hair was loose. He had only ever seen it pulled back, and she was wearing a grey sweatshirt and jeans, no uniform, no careful composure. She stopped on the third step from the bottom and looked at him and did not say anything. He held up biscuit. She pressed her hand over her mouth. "Eli sent him," Zaire said. "He said you always sit on the floor and talk until the person comes out." She sat down on the step, not because she was told to, because her legs had made the decision before her mind could argue with it. The same way he had sat down in his study 2 days ago when she had said things that required solid ground. He crossed to the stairs and sat on the step below her so that they were at roughly the same level, close enough to speak without raising their voices. He set biscuit on the step between them. "You were wrong," he said. "In the note." She looked at her hands. "I wasn't." "You were." He turned toward her. "You said you weren't brave enough to stay. That's incorrect. Everything you've done for the last 2 years has required an extraordinary amount of courage. Finding him, keeping him safe, showing up at my door with evidence that could have gotten you fired, or worse. You are one of the bravest people I have encountered in my entire adult life, and I am not saying that lightly because I don't say things lightly." She was quiet. Her jaw was working. "Then why did I run?" she said, very quietly, almost to herself. "Because being brave about other people's lives is different from being brave about your own," he said. "You can walk into a burning building for someone else. The hard part is admitting that you want something for yourself." She looked up at him. Her eyes were wet. She was not making any effort to hide it, which told him she was too tired to perform composure, and he found that he was profoundly glad, because her composure, while remarkable, was a wall, and he was done with walls between them. "I was standing in your house," she said, "in that sunroom at 2 in the morning, and I was thinking about how it felt to pack Eli's dinosaur books, and how it felt when you adjusted biscuit in the elevator." She stopped, swallowed. "And I thought, I cannot want this. I cannot sit in this man's house and want the life inside it, because it is not my life. Eli is not my son. And you?" She shook her head. "And me," he said. "You are grieving," she said. "You just found out your child is alive. You are in the middle of the most destabilizing week of your adult life, whatever you think you feel, or might feel, or—" She pressed her lips together. "I didn't want to be the person you clung to because the world turned upside down. I didn't want to become necessary by accident." Zaire was quiet for a moment. He looked at biscuit on the step between them. He looked at the lobby of the Kehoe Inn. The dark wood, the afternoon light coming through the tall windows. The front desk woman who had developed a sudden pressing interest in a floral arrangement across the room. "Can I tell you something?" he said. She nodded. "I have not been a fully present human being in 4 years," he said. "I function. I perform. I execute. I have kept Nexum growing through sheer momentum and the work of people around me who are better than I deserve. But I have not been here." He touched his chest briefly. Not in this. Not in any room I've been in. He looked at her directly. And then I came home 3 days early from a trip I cut short because something felt wrong, which was the first time in 4 years I have trusted a feeling in my body. And you were standing in my doorway, and you told me the truth when you didn't have to, and then you told me more truth and more. He paused. And I have been fully present in every single minute since that doorstep, including the minutes I spent terrified that you had left and might not let me find you. She looked at him. That is not grief, he said. That is not the world turned upside down, making me reach for the nearest warm thing. I am a grown man who has been professionally trained to understand the difference between a crisis response and a genuine one. A beat. You are a genuine one. The lobby was very quiet. Outside on Columbia Square, Savannah moved in its slow, beautiful Spanish moss-draped way. Tourists on the square, a horse-drawn carriage turning the corner, the light going golden in the late afternoon. It was a city that had been waiting for something for a very long time and had learned to be patient about it. Odessa looked at the rabbit on the step between them. She looked at the man who had driven 3.5 hours alone to find her in a Victorian inn, with a stuffed rabbit in his hand because a 5-year-old had told him to sit on the floor and talk. I haven't let anyone in, she said. Since my father, I closed everything. I threw myself into Eli, and I told myself that was enough, and most days it was. She exhaled shakily. But some nights in that apartment, I would get Eli to sleep, and I would sit in the kitchen, and it was so quiet, and I was so tired of being quiet. I know, he said. I know that quiet. She looked at him. Dessa, he said. And it was the first time he had called her that, Eli's name for her, and the intimacy of it was enormous, and neither of them pretended it wasn't. Come home. It's not my home, she said, but it came out less certain than she intended. Not yet, he said, but Eli is there, and I am asking, and I would very much like the chance to make it true over time, if you are willing to let me try. He paused. I am not asking you to decide everything right now. I am asking you to come back. The rest we can figure out one day at a time. She sat on the 3rd step of a Victorian staircase in Savannah and looked at a man who was offering her the most frightening thing she had ever been offered. The genuine, unhurried, clear-eyed possibility of being chosen. She picked up Biscuit, held him, set him down. I need to call Darnetta, she said. She's been worried. Of course, he said, and I need to eat something. I haven't eaten since yesterday morning, and I'm not good at large emotional decisions on an empty stomach. There's a restaurant 2 blocks from here, he said. We can walk. She looked at him. Something in her expression shifted, the last of the held-back distance, the self-protective, careful management of what she let herself want, giving way to something simpler and more terrifying. Okay, she said. She stood up. She picked up Biscuit. She came down the last 3 steps. They walked out of the Kehoe Inn into the golden Savannah afternoon, side by side, and they did not resolve everything, not the legal complexity of Eli's situation, not the case against Coltrane, not the enormous improbability of whatever was beginning between them. They resolved none of it, but they walked 2 blocks through the Spanish moss and the afternoon light, and they sat across from each other in a window booth at a restaurant on Bull Street, and Odessa ate shrimp and grits, and Zaya had a cup of coffee, and they talked, really talked the way people talk when the performance is finally over and only the actual people are left, for 3 hours. At one point she laughed. A real laugh, unexpected, surprised out of her by something he said about the Nexum board meeting, where someone had actually fallen asleep mid-presentation. It was not a polished laugh. It was the laugh of a woman who had forgotten she could still make that sound. He watched it happen and did not say anything about it. He just let it be there. On the drive back to Atlanta, she sat in the passenger seat with Biscuit in her lap and her phone off, and the Georgia darkness rolling past the windows. Zaire drove with one hand on the wheel and the radio low, an old Stevie Wonder record. Soft and unhurried. Somewhere past Macon, she fell asleep. He drove the rest of the way in the particular silence of someone who is carrying something precious and knows exactly how careful to be. The federal investigation took 11 weeks. It moved the way federal investigations always move, with the grinding, deliberate, bureaucratic momentum of a machine that does not hurry for anyone but cannot ultimately be stopped once it begins turning. The SEC field office in Atlanta opened the inquiry on a Thursday. The FBI Financial Crimes Division joined 6 days later. By the time the first subpoenas landed, Coltrane Wexler had already retained 3 separate legal teams, issued a public statement through Nexum's communications department describing the allegations as a reckless mischaracterization of standard financial operations, and placed 2 calls to Zaire that Zaire did not return. Zaire did not need to return them. He had already talked to everyone who mattered. Odessa's photographs, 6 clean, steady images of Coltrane's authorization chain, the subsidiary charter, and the Cayman account beneficial ownership records were delivered to the SEC via Zaire's legal team on the morning of the second day. They were accompanied by a sworn affidavit from Odessa Pruitt, CPA candidate, former forensic accounting associate, who stated clearly and with the precise, jargon-fluent authority of someone who knew exactly what she had found and exactly what it meant, that she had discovered the documents in the course of her employment at the Ashford residence and had recognized the irregularities immediately. The affidavit took her 4 hours to write. Zaire sat at the kitchen island while she wrote it, working through his own calls and correspondence, close enough that she could ask him anything she needed. She asked 3 questions. She did not need more. When she slid the finished document across the island to him, he read it in full before passing it to his attorney. He looked up when he finished. "You're going to be called as a witness," he said. "I know," she said. "It could be difficult. His legal team will try to discredit you. Your employment status, your background, the fact that you were in the house when you shouldn't have been in the study." "Mrs. Farrow's written authorization says otherwise," she said. "And I was a licensed CPA candidate with 2 years of forensic accounting experience. Let them try to explain to a federal jury why a housekeeper recognized an offshore fraud scheme that Coltrane Wexler's own CFO apparently missed." She held his gaze evenly. "I'm not afraid of being questioned." He looked at her for a moment. "No," he said, "I don't imagine you are." The attorney, when she arrived 40 minutes later with her briefcase and her measured Harvard-trained precision, read the affidavit and set it down and said, "This is excellent work." Odessa said thank you and poured herself a second cup of coffee, and Zaire watched her from across the room and felt the deep, structural rightness of her being there. Not as a housekeeper, not as a witness, not as the woman who had found his son, but simply as herself, taking up exactly the space she deserved in a room she had earned. The formal identification of Elias Ashford took 6 days. The DNA process was straightforward. Zaire's sample, Eli's sample, the genetic confirmation that arrived in a lab report that used measured clinical language to describe something that was, in human terms, a miracle. The DFCS caseworker, a tired, kind woman named Lorraine, who had been managing Eli's file for 2 years and who wept quietly in her car after the meeting, which Odessa knew because Darnetta had seen her through the parking garage window and reported back, processed the paperwork with extraordinary efficiency given how much of it there was. Zaire's family law attorney handled the recognition filing. It was, legally speaking, the most straightforward part of the entire situation: a biological father, a confirmed identity, a child in foster care with no competing claims. The law had a clear answer. The harder question, the one that did not have a legal answer, was Eli himself. They told him on a Saturday morning. Zaire had thought carefully about this, about Eli's temperament, about the advice of the child psychologist he had consulted, about what Odessa had said in the study 2 weeks ago. Step carefully. He is not fragile, but he is 6 years old, and the most important thing we can give him right now is the truth delivered by someone who can be steady. They told him together. Sitting on the living room floor of the Havisham house, the three of them, with Biscuit present in an advisory capacity, Zaire explained in simple and honest language that he was Eli's father, that he had not known Eli was alive, that he had looked for him, and that he was never going to stop looking. He explained that Eli's mother, Camille, had loved him very much. He showed Eli a photograph. Eli looked at the photograph for a long time. He looked at Zaire. He looked at Odessa. Then he said, "So you're my dad?" "Yes," Zaire said. Eli considered this with the gravity of someone processing genuinely new information about the structure of the world. "Do I have to call you Dad?" "Only if you want to," Zaire said. "You can call me Zaire. You can take as long as you need." Eli nodded. He picked up Biscuit. He looked at Odessa with an expression she recognized. The particular look he gave her when he was working out something emotionally complex and needed her face as a reference point, the way sailors used fixed stars. "Is Dessa still my Dessa?" he said. Odessa's throat closed entirely. "Yes," Zaire said. "Dessa is always your Dessa." Eli seemed satisfied with this fundamental continuity. He put Biscuit down and picked up a Lego piece from the coffee table and said, "I think Gerald needs a friend, another volcano. Maybe a girl volcano." "What would the girl volcano's name be?" Zaire asked. Eli thought about it. "Patricia," he said, with great conviction, and that was more or less the end of the difficult portion of the conversation. Coltrane Wexler was arrested on a Tuesday in early December, 6 weeks before Christmas, in the parking garage of his Buckhead office building. He was accompanied out in handcuffs at 9:15 in the morning. His communications team released a statement 20 minutes later, describing the arrest as a politically motivated overreach, which fooled no one who had read the SEC filing, which detailed 11 wire transfers totaling just over $22 million in fraudulent authorizations over 16 months. By noon, it was the lead story on every Atlanta news outlet. By evening, it had been picked up nationally. By the following morning, a financial journalist at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution had traced the beneficial ownership chain of Wexler Pruitt Partners to its origins. 6 years ago, a joint real estate venture in Buckhead, a developer named Declan Pruitt, who had lost everything, and had written a story about it that ran on the front page of the business section beneath the headline, "The Name He Never Erased." Odessa read it on her phone in the kitchen of the Havisham house at 6:30 in the morning before Eli was awake. She read it twice. She set the phone face down on the counter and looked out the window at the Atlanta December morning. The sky, pale and silver, a light frost on the oak leaves, a cardinal on the back fence that sat there for exactly a moment before deciding to be somewhere else. She thought about her father, Declan Pruitt, 62 years old, who had built his company over 30 years and lost it in a handshake and died of a broken heart wearing the polite medical name of hemorrhagic stroke, who had taught her to read a balance sheet at 11 and to trust numbers because numbers, he said, do not lie. People lie, but the numbers always tell you what happened if you know how to look. She had known how to look. She had looked. "Hey," Zaire said. She turned. He was in the kitchen doorway, early morning, still in the clothes of someone who had been working late and slept in his office chair and was not embarrassed about it. He looked at her face and then at the phone on the counter. "You read it," he said. "Yes," she said. He crossed to the kitchen. He poured himself a cup of coffee from the pot she had already made. He leaned against the counter beside her and looked out the same window at the same December morning. "The civil recovery attorney filed the claim yesterday," he said, "against the Wexler Pruitt Partners assets. It's a strong claim. The beneficial ownership trace is clean and the fraud documentation is solid." He paused. "It won't be everything your father lost, but it will be substantial, and it will have his name on it. The judgment when it comes. Declan Pruitt, plaintive. He looked at her. I made sure of that. She did not trust herself to speak for a moment. You didn't have to do that, she said. I know, he said. I wanted to. Outside, the cardinal came back to the fence. It sat there longer this time, as if it had decided the yard was worth the attention after all. December moved through the house like a season that had been waiting for permission to arrive. Eli discovered that the Havisham house had a proper attic, and spent 3 consecutive afternoons exploring it with a flashlight, emerging each time with questions about objects he had found. An old tennis racket, a box of cassette tapes, a barometer in a mahogany case that required extensive research. He started first grade at a school 3 blocks from the house, and within 2 weeks had informed his class that his dad worked with computers and his dessert made the best French toast in Georgia, and that his rabbit biscuit had survived a car accident, which was not entirely accurate, but contained emotional truth. Zaire went back to work. Nexum, in the weeks following Coltrane's arrest, required the focused and careful attention of a company whose co-founder had just been federally indicted and whose board needed reassurance and whose press inquiries had multiplied by a factor of 17. He managed it with the particular competence of someone who had rebuilt things before and knew the process, not comfortable, but navigable. He worked long hours and came home for dinner when he could, and always came home for dinner on the nights Odessa made French toast, which she had started doing on Fridays because Eli had declared it a law. He had not pushed. He had said what he said in Savannah, and he had meant it one day at a time, and he meant it still. He was patient in the way that people are patient when they understand the value of what they are waiting for. She moved through the house with a different quality than she had when she was cleaning it. Less careful, more present. She left a book on the kitchen counter half read. She put a plant on the sunroom windowsill without asking. She argued with him once about the thermostat setting with the ease of someone who had stopped treating the space as a place she might be asked to leave. He did not point any of this out. He just turned the thermostat to where she wanted it. It was 3 days before Christmas when he asked her, not a grand gesture. No candles or orchestrated moment. Zaire had thought about that and had decided that a woman who had survived 4 years of managed aloneness and 2 years of quiet courage deserved something realer than orchestration. He asked her in the kitchen after Eli had gone to bed, while she was washing a bowl that did not need to be hand-washed, but she was washing it anyway because she thought better with her hands occupied. He leaned against the counter. "Stay," he said. Not as Eli's foster parent, not as a witness or an employee, or someone who happened to find the right folder on the right desk. He looked at her steadily. "Stay as the person you are, the person I would like to spend a very long time getting to know better." He paused. "I'm not asking you to decide everything right now. I'm asking you to stop treating this house like a place you're visiting." She set the bowl down. She turned to face him. "I'm not easy," she said. "I am stubborn, and I overcalculate, and I have a strong opinion about the thermostat." "I know," he said. "I find all of those things completely tolerable." "I ran away to Savannah." "You did. And I drove 3.5 hours with a stuffed rabbit. I think that establishes that I'm not easily deterred." She looked at him, at the kitchen of the house she'd been cleaning for 8 months and living in for 6 weeks, and quietly, without deciding to, making her own. At the man who had sat on her apartment floor and talked about the depth perception of the T-Rex with her son as naturally as breathing. "Yes," she said. Just that. One word. The simplest and most complete answer. He smiled, the real one, the one she had been learning to recognize, the one that took up his whole face and had been somewhere behind his composure for months, waiting to come out. He reached across the counter and covered her hand with his, once, briefly, in the way of someone who has learned the difference between taking and offering. "Merry Christmas," he said. She laughed, that real laugh again, the one that surprised her. "It's the 22nd, she said. "I'm working ahead," he said. Christmas morning was loud in the way that houses with small children are loud, wrapping paper everywhere. Eli, in his pajamas, explaining at length why Gerald the Lego volcano needed a companion whom he had not named Patricia, but had in fact named Gerald II, which was, he maintained, a completely different kind of name. Biscuit was present in a Santa hat that Eli had fashioned from a felt ornament with craft scissors, which Biscuit bore with his customary dignity. Darnetta came for dinner, and Mrs. Farrow and Terrell, who it turned out had a very good laugh that no one had ever heard before because the setting had never previously called for it. There was a standing rib roast and cornbread and sweet potato pie, and an argument about whether the gravy had enough pepper that ended amicably. Eli fell asleep on the living room floor at 7:30 with his head on Biscuit and 2 strips of tinsel in his hair, and Zaire carried him upstairs with the careful, reverent ease of a man who understood the full weight of what he was holding. He came back downstairs to find Odessa in the living room, gathering wrapping paper, the house quiet around her, the Christmas tree lights reflecting in the dark windows. He stood in the doorway. She looked up. They were quiet together for a moment, the good kind of quiet, the kind that is full rather than empty, that says everything that doesn't need words. "Hey," he said. "Hey," she said. And then from upstairs, clear and small and unself-conscious, the voice of a child talking in his sleep the way children do when their dreams are satisfied. Biscuit, the Argentinosaurus, Gerald, and then Dad. Just that, murmured into a pillow, half-conscious, already gone back to dreaming. One word, the simplest and most complete thing. Zaire stood in the doorway and could not speak. His jaw worked. He pressed the back of his hand to his mouth. Odessa set down the wrapping paper. She crossed the room. She stood in front of him and looked up at his face, at everything written there, the 4 years of grief and the 11 weeks of revelation, and the 39-year-old man who had driven to Savannah with a one-eared rabbit and had learned to let his thermostat be adjusted and had come home early from a trip because something felt wrong and walked into the beginning of everything. She took his hand. He held it. Outside, Atlanta was quiet in the way it gets on Christmas night. The neighborhood still, the oak trees silver with frost, a sky so clear you could see Orion standing watch above the rooftops of Habersham Road. Inside, a little boy slept with his rabbit in a room full of dinosaur books and Lego volcanoes and drawings on the walls, in a house that had been empty for 4 years and was now thoroughly and irreversibly full. The civil judgment against Wexler Pruitt Partners was finalized the following March. Declan Pruitt's name was on it, as promised. Coltrane Wexler was convicted on 7 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of securities fraud. He received 11 years. Odessa Pruitt's testimony lasted 3 days. She did not flinch once. Eli Ashford started 2nd grade in the fall. And on the first day, when the teacher asked the class to introduce themselves and say one interesting fact, he said, "My name is Eli. My dad works with computers and my mom makes the best French toast in Georgia. My rabbit's name is Biscuit, and he is very brave." He meant all of it. The end.